Hello and welcome everyone to our final Global Learning Commons virtual event of the 2025-2026 school year. We are so excited to welcome three gentlemen from Chappaqua Public Schools in New York. We have two assistant superintendents, Adam Pease and Josh Culwell-Block, as well as the Director of Instructional Technology and Public Communication, Adam Schoenbart. We are going to hear about a long partnership between Fielding International and Chappaqua Public Schools going all the way back to 2014 when they started a pilot project that really created more flexible spaces. And from that, 4 years later, led to the passing of a $42.5 million bond, which they were able to do a whole bunch of really cool projects, STEAM spaces, flexible spaces, commons, and they've learned a lot in that time. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to these three guys. Welcome.
Great. Thank you for having us. I am going to see if I can share my screen here. Give me just a second and we'll get ourselves started. I'm Adam Pease. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum. It's nice to be here. Up here in New York. It's drizzling a little bit. Hopefully the weather's nicer where you are. But we're going to jump right in. My name is, as Nathan was saying, my name is Adam Pease. Happy to be joined by Josh and Adam, and we'll zoom right through. We decided today to focus on STEAM. As Nathan was saying, we've worked with Fielding on redesigning a whole bunch of spaces K-12, but we figured we'd highlight STEAM and some things that we think will be helpful. But even if you are working in an area where maybe you're not focusing on STEAM, I hope some of the things that you learn here will be more widely applicable than just a STEAM program, kind of a way of thinking about teaching and learning and layering progressions to support student learning over time. So here you can see a little bit of a logo here, what we stand for, what we believe when it comes to STEAM education, trying to build a better world through STEAM education. And you see us there. So we thought we'd start off in the chat if we could, just to get people engaged. I love that some people already put in who they are and where they're from and what they do, which is really neat. That's helpful if people want to do that, just so we get a sense of who's here in the room. I had heard from our friends at Fielding that they had over 100 folks from really all over the world. I have a friend, Mark, in Switzerland, and he reached out and saw my name on the flyer and said, "Hey, I'm going to jump in." So Mark, if you're here, we're happy to have you. So anyway, in the chat, what have you designed that you're proud of? We try to name our kids with all kinds of like fields. We say, you're a math person, you're an artist, you're a writer, you're an author, and you're a designer. And so along that vein, we were hoping that you all could maybe pop in the chat something that you've designed that you're really proud of. Now, I know full well that some of us are actual designers, architects, things like that. You may be able to put in names of spaces, but for the rest of us, you design lessons, you design your closet, you design a garden, you design all kinds of things in your daily work. So if you have designed something you're proud of, drop it in there. I see all kinds of things, zip line ladders with a perch for my kids. Saw someone designed some good music over the years. That's pretty neat. Maybe as we continue to get some folks in the chat, what have you designed that you're proud of? Adam and Josh can keep an eye on it, call some neat things out there. A podcast, design curriculum. My living spaces, Nikki writes. A thoughtful entry to the school experience for young learners and their families. I love it. All right, those will continue to come in. I hope you enjoy reading them. So for those of you that are, from places further away, this is where Chappaqua is located. We're about a half an hour north of New York City. You can see it there on the map. This is just us by the numbers. I know this is a lot of text. We have this graphic. We figured we'd throw it in. Chappaqua is a pretty well-resourced public school district, K-12. We've got 6 schools, 3 elementaries, 2 middle schools, 1 high school, about 3,500 kids. 99% of our kids graduate in 4 years. 98% of them go on to college. You can see some pretty strong overall academic performance. We're typically ranked as one of the strongest public schools in the country. We're really proud of that. And we also understand that a lot of that is tied to the resources we have and the demographic we have. And to that end, we try to share as much as we can when we can to help support other school districts, open our doors for tours and things like that to try to be a lighthouse district for other districts. And we're also excited about partnering with districts so we can learn from others as well. This is a graphic that we use when it comes to, here's what we stand for when it comes to STEAM all in one place. So we believe that STEAM is not an event, it's not a special, it's not a subject, it's not a space, it's not a stool or a tool. It's a way of thinking about the complex challenges in the world. And so you can see here that engineers, we believe, or designers, we believe, have specific ways of thinking, ways of working, ways of communicating, and ways of using tools in space. And we try to build capacity in kids from kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade. And we've even pushed out look fors. And I know this will be recorded so folks can pause it and read through this if they'd like to. But we want to not only have the vision statement, which is the high level statement, but also what it actually looks like when you get in our spaces with our kids. So we tend to ground our STEAM work around the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So that way it's not just, pasta towers with marshmallows holding the joints or seams together, but instead kids doing, real work in the real world where they can solve real problems and, focus on real things, whether it's just modeling things or really having some positive impact in the world. This is what we use to drive our STEAM process K-12. All right, so we figured we'd start with just a virtual tour so you can get into some of our spaces. I wish we could walk everyone around. Obviously, we can't do that, but we'll do the best we can to walk you through virtually what we've got going on here in Chappaqua. We worked with Fielding many years ago over a whole bunch of different projects. I know this is a lot of small text, but we've got 3 elementary school global learning commons. Think old libraries that have been completely redesigned to a new model. Give you some pictures of what they look like. This is one of our elementary schools. You can see the flexible furniture, the sound tiles up in the ceiling, etc. Many of the folks from Fielding on this call net were actually responsible for some of this work. All of our elementary schools have maker spaces built in. You can see some of the traditional bookcases in the back, but also the flexible furniture, the technology integration, the sound tiles on the ceiling, lots of light. To move on to the middle school, we have STEAM centers in each of our middle schools. You can see how they are zoned so students can do work within those zones. And this just gives you a sense of how the students are working in these spaces. We've got assembly labs, fabrication spaces, collaboration labs, etc. Got places for direct instruction, places for students to present, collaborate. You can see by scanning the background there, you can see kids can work high, they can work low, they can sit on the floor, tables, etc. Lots of tools for them to start to learn how to fabricate in the middle school. You can see the signs there. You got a door to the assembly lab. So students move through these various spaces. That's the fire pit there on the right side. One of our fantastic STEAM teachers, Jenny Giris. You can see signs for digital design, prototyping studios, things like that. I'll also say that I understand fully that some of you have fantastic spaces like this and others don't. You don't have to do STEAM in spaces like this. We have some great STEAM activities that happen on the playground, they happen in the cafeterias, they happen in the classrooms. But these spaces do amplify the work that we do. Here's one of our teachers. This is actually a shaker table that the students designed because they were testing earthquake-proof structures that they were building as part of the 6th grade curriculum. Tech integration with some green screens. This is an electric car. Remember this picture because it's part of the continuum where kids are building electric vehicles across the district. Those are middle school kids. Up at the high school, we've got a STEAM building. It's 2 floors. We've also got a greenhouse, which I'll show you a picture of. It's got a big, beautiful kiva in it, high ceilings. See the students working there. We've got some different rooms. This is a room of 3D printers here on the right side. This is all work in collaboration between the district and Fielding as part of that $42.5 million instructional grant that we did. This is our laser cutter room on the left side, a modeling room on the right side. It's a little bit of a student proud of her laser cutter work. She was doing some etching, but you can see some of the heavier machinery, table saws, drill presses, things like that up at the high school. So that gives you a sense of what we're looking at. At the high school, we're building an electric car. This is the 2.0 version of what you saw in the middle school car that we were building. This is a switch vehicle, which is a pretty nice. You can put it together and take it apart as part of the K-12 curriculum. We also have a fashion loft where we also do some robotics up here as well. So this is wearable, recycled fashion and robotics in that room. And then we built a sustainability research center. This is a $2.5 million facility for our students to engage in plant science, and they grow food for the local food pantry. And we just dropped off 45 pounds of lettuce for the local food pantry. They get a lot of non-perishable food, but they don't get a lot of fresh grown food. So we produce produce with the students for the local pantry. Okay, so that's a little bit of a tour. I know that was a lot to see, but it gives you a sense, hopefully, of our spaces here in Chappaqua. This presentation is about the power of progressions and thinking in progressions. And we, as educators, are used to thinking in progressions, although they're not always apparent to us. When you think of how we teach students math, for example, it would make sense to you to hear students learn numbers and counting first, and then we teach them how to add, then teach them how to subtract, how to multiply, how to divide. And it always happens in that order because that order makes sense. It's part of a progression. And so our push in this presentation is to try to get you to think more in progressions as you think about how space interacts with technology and instructional goals in your district. So here's the three progressions that we're going to go through. One of them is a design thinking progression, and we're going to share the instructional space progression and the technology tool progression. And we're going to try to layer those things on top of each other as we go. I'm going to do design thinking, and Josh is going to do instructional space, and Adam Schoenbart's going to do technology tools. And we're going to go through K4, 5, 8, 9, 12. That happens to be how our schools are broken down. I know in some districts they're K5, et cetera, different breaks at different points, but I think you'll get the idea. So let's go back to the chat if we could. How many design thinking graphics do you have? So there's lots of different iterations of this. Usually you see things like step one, empathize, step two, define, ideate, prototype, and then test. Sometimes you see these things in a circle. So the question is, how many do you have as a district, if any? The answer might be 0, 1, 2, 3. And then the second thing is a bonus if you can link it in. So do you have any design thinking models that you use with your students? If so, how many? And then bonus points if you link them in. I'll give you a minute. And the answer of 0 is quite all right. Hopefully after this presentation, you might change that answer. So I see a 3. Scott puts in a 3. That's a good one. If you have a link to it, Scott, that would be excellent. Marie says she has 2. Amy and Melissa have 1 each, which is not unusual in a school district. We actually started with 1 and then we started to build it out. Nate has 2. I'd love to see some. If folks put them in the chat, maybe while Josh is presenting, I can go through and see what you've got. So let me share with you that we actually have 4. And this is the first progression that I wanted to share. We did some thinking about how to build capacity in kids to think like designers. And what we found is that although as adults we've got a pretty sophisticated model, for kids we really had to simplify this. So where we start in the primary grades is with just a 3-step model that's basically think, make, and then reflect. And we pose problems to our students in ways that they can work through this and teach them that they're going to think of the first solution and then they're going to try to think of another solution. So they're going to do 3 rotations of that think, and then they're going to pick their best option to make. And then once they make, they're going to share it. They're going to get some feedback. They're going to reflect. And in some cases, they make more than once. They can make a prototype, they make it, they try it again. Now, that we do this with our K2 students in our maker spaces, also in our classrooms and other spaces. Then we make it a little bit more sophisticated as we get to the upper elementary. And you can see we start to add some words and start to add some subsets or sub-steps. So instead of just think, make, and reflect, we add into think. We've got some like stages of that. The first thing is to either ask or find a really good question, then to explore, then to make some choices. So we start to work with kids and how to make this model a little bit more sophisticated in 3rd and 4th grade. Here in 5th through 8th, it gets more sophisticated still, and you see like a little bit more of a sophistication of that language as it goes. So you see these things as posters hanging in these spaces with our students, and all of our projects that we do in all these STEAM centers, whether they're standalone projects as part of technology or embedded in part of their course, we have students work through these different models as they go. But you start to see some of that much more sophisticated language like prototyping, logistics, producing, et cetera. So you start to get a more, kind of adult version of what the STEAM process looks like. And then within each of those sub-steps, you see some other things that happen, like the kind of expectations within those sub steps. So all put together, you basically get this continuum or this progression where we've thought about the kinds of experiences that kids have K2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 12, and this builds over time as they move through our schools. So to the kids, it makes sense, and they build this capacity to think like designers over time. This is just one snapshot of the first part of the progression, but I think you get the idea of how these progressions kind of move through and get more sophisticated, and the thinking deepens as the kids go. So that's the first progression that we wanted to share. We're going to transition over to Josh, and he's going to share the second progression. So now we've got this way we want kids to develop their thinking skills. We're going to transition into, okay, so like what kind of instructional space do you use to develop those thinking skills over time? So with that, Josh, I'm going to hand it over to you. If you pause, I'll click the slides, or you can just cue me as we go.
Yeah. So Thanks, everybody. Josh Culwell-Block, Assistant Superintendent for Business. So we've been working with fielding since 2014, and I can't believe it's been 12 years of this work to create our spaces and our progressions. You could see here we have our elementary school maker spaces. We aligned our we created our design thinking process before we created the spaces. So as you see the language in the design thinking process expand as we move on, so does the language that we use in our spaces. So in elementary school, our GLC, our global learning centers and our maker spaces, our middle schools, our STEAM centers, and then to our STEAM building and our sustainability research center at our high school, sort of having this progression getting more sophisticated as time goes on. However, keeping everything with the same strand and the same progression. And we can move on to the next slide. We aligned a lot of our spaces to the pieces of the design thinking progression. So the think or the pre-production, right, that language moves up. You could see here we have design commons in all of our spaces. So students, faculty have spaces either low tech or high tech to begin their pre-production, to begin thinking through the problems that they're trying to solve, the things that they're trying to make, iterating over that, being able to present their ideas. There's spaces in each of our centers that do that along with the progression for students. I always use the concept that students learn fractions and scientific notation in 5 different courses over 3 different levels, and we never put that strand together. But putting that strand together allows the transferability of those skills. Having spaces that are on along the same continuum allows those transferability of skills as well. And you can go to the next slide. In our make, you could see here's now where the students are starting to construct things. In the top left, you could see students working at tables with their iPads, with markers and crayons and scissors and things that are appropriate of an elementary K-4 level. In the top left, you could see now students working in the STEAM Center, creating things with glue and sticks and some more heavy duty machinery, and then the beginning to get high tech and larger machinery. We have smaller laser cutters in our middle schools, but in the bottom left, you could see a large epilogue laser cutter in our high school. And then the bottom right, Adam had already talked about sort of this progression of building cars and robots. You could see students constructing with what would be industrial grade materials and industrial grade machinery in our STEAM building in our fabrication labs. I'm going to go to the next slide. And then always as part of it is our reflection, our presentation, our presenting a skill, right? Just making something is not the same as being able to sell it, being able to reflect it, being able to present about it. So in all of our buildings, we have presentation space. So in the upper right, we have presentation areas within our global learning commons. In our middle schools, we have presentation spaces where students can gather around U-shaped area and present. And then coming up to our high school in our STEAM building, we have a Kiva, which is this large 2.5 story design space. In the bottom left, you can't really see the scale of that, but that is a huge wall of displays where students are learning how to make large scale presentations as if they're giving a keynote address on what they were designed. And then they're reflecting on it. So again, the progression of space and teaching students the initial design thinking, the making the product and teaching them those tools, and then reflecting and presenting on their products, learning each progression as they go through those spaces. Okay, Adam, you can go to the next one. And here you could also see when we created our spaces at each location, we created them around each part of the design thinking process so that students can start to see what tools and what space and flexible work areas they could use for each part of the design process. And this link from space and tools and machinery to making those decisions of how I work so that students can start to begin. We teach them explicitly in a young age what space to use for what part of the design thinking, to letting them choose their own spaces in the high school, in the STEAM building. You could see here we sort of outline and have these up within our schools when we built each one of what part that is. It's been really exciting to see over time because now we're in getting into year 6 and 7 of all of these spaces being completed, to seeing students just come into these spaces, particularly in the high school, and feel really comfortable with it, even though it's a new space, because it looks really familiar, just layering on what the next level of learning is in there. And so there's a lot of, particularly around like safety things that we don't need to do because we did it in our middle school and it's the same. Ways of work, ways of collaborating, the technology piece of it that Adam's going to present in a second. All of that looks very familiar so that we could really start to jump into the core education that's happening, the core creation that's happening, and the core presenting that's happening.
Right, Josh, if I could just add,
Yeah.
it's neat to see how the design thinking process moves through in this like circular fashion through this space. So usually the lessons start in this presentation area with some teacher-driven direct instruction laying out what the project's going to look like. And then the students move to the right for this like planning and research phase of this. And then they move up to the top right, where there's like this light fabrication where they start to tinker. And then the fabrication gets more like heavier and more sophisticated as they move through all the way to this like heavier production area. And eventually they circle back out to the presentation area where they're presenting their product. And so you get students working on different things at the same time as they work through this design process almost in a cycle. And so even if you're not in a place as a district where you can build a brand new STEAM center and model some of this stuff, you could even do this kind of thing in a classroom or in a cafeteria or something like that as you're thinking about how the design process flows through a particular space.
Yeah, and I think I'd just add, we piloted all of these in classrooms, in the cafeteria. We even mapped out with tape spaces. So in really, we didn't need to build these large spaces while it helps, in order to achieve the educational objectives that we had.
Great. Thank you, Josh. So next we're going to transition to Adam Schoenbart. Dr. Schoenbart's going to talk us through the technology tools. That's the last of the three layers that we're going to cover. So you saw a progression of design thinking, a progression of instructional space, and now we're going to talk a little bit more about a progression of technology tools. I'll turn it over to Adam.
Hi, everybody. So, just to kick us off in the chat, how do you use technology to make in your school? We'll start off with that as a framing question for our technology section. And what I hope you'll see here is similar to what Josh and Adam discussed, is the layering, the increased sophistication throughout our schools, throughout as students get older, the technology evolves with them, builds on what they've learned previously, but really does so in support of the learning and of these models of thinking. And I'm focusing on make here just as one example. We could talk about all elements of our design thinking models here, but wanted to focus on a narrow lens for us. Before we get into those progressions, we just thought that this blueprint image was really powerful to frame this conversation. This is our Seven Bridges Middle School STEAM Center. And on the right here, you'll see tech and equipment. And this comes right from the blueprint. And you have everything here from the workstations. And this is actually the space that Josh and Adam were just discussing. So it's really relevant here. So we see everything from the workstation, the TVs, but then there's built-in power everywhere. There's writable surfaces, projectors. So high tech, low tech, all built in to the space so that we can really map, like Adam just discussed, that progression of design thinking in the technology that is there within the space to support that learning. So I'm going to talk about a few ways we progress with technology. So this is just a overview of some of our thinking of progression. So between our elementary, middle, and high school, students use similar devices, similar experiences, and practice similar skills with an increase in sophistication, independence, and moving from simple, safe tools to start to more sophisticated, real world, and specialized tools and equipment. So for devices, our students start in our elementary and through sixth grade on iPads. They move to MacBooks, and in our high school, we're bring your own device because students get to make choices about whatever device they need for their learning. And often that involves students bringing or using our specialized high-end devices for work around STEAM and science research and these specialized areas. We focus on creating multimedia through tools like iMovie and Clips, but then we move to Soundtrap and to Adobe Illustrator. That's not to say that those earlier tools aren't still available, but we're providing multiple choices for students to make so that they can make choices as they learn more and find the right fit for them and their learning. And then in terms of coding and robotics, similarly, right? In robotics, for example, Ozobots, Bebots, Viros are in our elementary schools. Some of those are also in our middle schools, but we progress to things like the Infento kits, which provide a lot of flexibility for students to design their own path in robotics learning, and all the way to the Switch electric car that Adam shared earlier. So those kind of progressions and evolution of our technology is still all throughout, embedded through our technology, all throughout our instructional programs. Now, as we think about technology in space, Adam and I were, as we were talking about the session, he gave me a really nice framing I'll share with you of we can make and we can produce by removing, or we could do so by adding. So I'm going to frame this progression through three lenses, through a lens for each of those, so removing and adding. So in our elementary schools, we have our maker spaces. We also have carts that can go to the classroom. So it doesn't all need to happen in our space, but this space is designed to support this learning. Students are starting low tech. They might use scissors. They might use chomp saws to add a little more to infuse a little more technology in there. Then as we go to our middle school programs, right? The chomp saw is still there. Our middle school students are using it as appropriate, but they're learning how to use some tools like scroll saws, chop saws, and real woodworking skills. They take a design art course. They take a tech education course where they're really learning how to use these, master the skills around the equipment for STEAM and creation, making and producing, so that they can then apply that throughout the rest of their middle school experience in the high school, where they have a lot more independence and choice. And as we go to the high school, this is an example actually from one of our physics classes of laser cut car models that students created. So all examples of making by removing, same skill. We're still essentially designing and cutting, but using technology and tools that progress throughout with more sophistication, more complexity, and giving students choice to learn multiple different ways to do something. If we think about making and producing by adding, they're very similarly. I'm going to focus on 3D printing in this example here, but we have 3D printing pens starting for our earliest learners. We also have some standard 3D printers in our elementary school, but we start with low stakes, simple ways to understand design thinking and creation through 3D printing. We move to our middle schools, and in our STEAM centers, you saw some pictures earlier, but we have 3D printing rooms with a range of models. What we found in our experience is we design those early on with higher end models that over time, as new technology evolves, we find that the simpler, cheaper, more affordable models are more practical for our student use. They print faster. You can replace them faster as you need to. So that technology really matches the student experience within these spaces. And then in our high school, you'll see kind of a similar example here, but a wider range of models, a high-end 3D printer there on the left. There is some consistency in models we use and pilot throughout that middle school, high school experience. But when we get to the high school, there are multiple methods of printing, of modeling, of creation. Again, adding skill, sophistication tied to the instructional needs, design thinking model, and to utilizing these spaces. And then on this last slide here, you see those six in progression there, showing how the space, how the tech overlays with the ways of work around thinking and creation through our design thinking models.
Great. So we're kind of coming to the end of our part, and we're going to do a little bit of discussion in some breakout rooms. This is what we were hoping you'd be thinking about at this point. How can you layer your K-12 progressions to unlock learning For us, we're thinking about design thinking as one, instructional space as another, technology integration as the third. But even if you're not, as I said, even if you're not the steamiest of folks in the district that you're currently in, there's lots of ways to think about these progressions in any subject area and how space can amplify the thinking, how technology can further amplify that. So hopefully, as you think about mapping out these progressions, if you haven't already, put them on top of each other as you kind of squash them down and layer them and think about that experience for kids at these three things that, whether it's design thinking or some of the other content or skills, how that's layered in with instructional space to amplify that thinking, and then infuse the technology, braid those three together, and you get a pretty powerful experience. So with that, we'll turn it back over to the team at Fielding. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to present to the crew.
All right, thanks, guys. That was awesome. So much to chew on there. A couple things that are top of my mind for me is the intention that you had around creating that vision for teaching and learning before getting into the space, and then really starting small, allowing yourself to learn from the starting small and really getting into the bigger projects. And just the intention around the progressions that you have. I think this is brilliant. So thank you for that. We are going to go into breakouts for about 10 minutes. We would love for you to stick around. We feel that the value of reflecting and kind of talking to one another in smaller groups is really powerful. So we'll do that. And then we'll come back in about 10 minutes, and the last 20 minutes or so, it'll just be an open discussion. Come back with any questions that are on your mind. Love for you just to chew on what you just heard, anything that you like, anything around what they just shared that you're wondering about. This is a time for that. So thanks for being here. I'll send us to breakout rooms, and we'll be back in about 10 minutes. All right, welcome back, everyone. I had the privilege to be with Josh, and there was a great question by Sandra around the expectations for teacher collaboration. And I think the answer that he gave, I'd love to hear Josh, you or Adam and Adam share about, because I think that's a huge thing that so many schools are trying to do is more adult collaboration, more co-teaching,
Yeah.
and team teaching. And Josh had mentioned that really early on, it was an emphasis that with this new space, there's an expectation of more adult collaboration. So Josh or Adam and Adam, can you kind of share about that process to move towards more collaborative practices?
Yeah. I don't know. So at the high school, we have teachers that are assigned to classes. They are teaching their individual classes. But in the beginning, I said like it was weird to answer this question now. In the beginning, they very explicitly collaborated with each other on what they were teaching, but more importantly, what space they were using and how those spaces were used and acculturated. To the point now where when I go in there, it's really I don't know which kid is in which class, but they're working throughout the space. And I do see like the teachers helping whoever's in sort of that space out. And that's high school. In the middle school, we do have a STEAM teacher in each one where the other core faculty bring their students to those spaces for them to use it. They have clubs and things like that. But it's important to have that teacher assigned to that space. And in the elementary schools, it's our library media specialists.
But Josh, if I could add to that,
Yeah.
I have long since believed that the best way to kill an initiative is to mandate it, because as soon as you start to mandate it, you set this like minimum, which becomes a maximum, and so there's this Goldilocks between the zone between like there's an expectation around all kids getting in these spaces and using them well, and making it feel to our faculty like it's some kind of top-down mandate, right? So what we have done where we are right now is we have anchor projects built in that every student has a fall and a spring anchor project that we know are consistent across our buildings for K all the way through, all the way through the middle schools. Once they get into high school, they pick courses, so it's a little bit different. But we've got those anchor projects, and then above and beyond that, teachers use the STEAM centers for all kinds of things. And some of the most creative uses are things that we never could have imagined. For example, in social studies, they do a civil rights monument project where they actually they pick a historical event around some kind of civil rights issue that they don't feel is memorialized in the way it should be or as much as it should be, and they create a monument. They do some research, they create a monument, they actually build the monument in the STEAM center. So that was a neat way for like social studies to integrate into STEAM, not necessarily necessarily your, typical go-to like STEAMy subjects, but and then these little models of monuments are displayed with the writing pieces of why this event needs to be memorialized in American history in a way that perhaps it's not. So that's kind of we've been working hard to get teachers in there. We also early on we were modeling, like we had faculty meetings in these spaces where we were working with the faculty, moving them through design thinking processes in these different spaces so they could see how to use the all the different parts.
Oh,
Another
there.
thing I think we've been fairly strong at is providing time for teachers to work in teams purposefully. So mo at most of our schools and grade levels, our teams have common planning time. So it's relatively easy to say, all right, we know, I don't know, third grade is an area we need to really focus on some STEAM in the second semester. We haven't that connection hasn't been made as strongly. So in your department meetings, someone's going to push in, support you, help figure out how we can make that authentic connection to your curriculum, so that we have that time with teachers, and we also have a balance of the teacher experts who teach the courses in the spaces, but in many of the spaces also have some flexibility in their schedule, with the expectation that our middle school STEAM teachers will be supporting other teachers and other students outside of their normal teaching load, so that they have a reasonable amount of time to be able to do that work. So I think the time and the scheduling is really important too.
Awesome.
Oh, so there's an AI question. Can I jump in
Yeah,
on
I
that
was
one?
gonna,
Do you
yeah.
mind? All right, I just need to share. We had developed a few slides that we didn't share with the group. And so there's
Right.
a question in the chat about how does AI factor into this? So one of the projects that the kids do at the high school is around taking an old shipping container and redesigning it into a tiny home that's like a sustainable, environmentally friendly tiny home. That's the project. You can see one of the models on the left side. It's like stacked tiny homes that are made out of these shipping containers. We have a board policy that AI is to be taught as part of every single course that we teach starting in kindergarten. So I know that's a little progressive. Probably a lot of people are not there, but our expectation for teachers is that they use it with students. We provide the tools, we provide the training, and we're thinking it's here. Students need to know how to use it, when to use it, how to use it responsibly, and how to use it to amplify their learning and not steal their learning. So the kids do the low tech things on the left, as you can see, but they also these are AI generated models that students built out of these prompts around sustainable shipping containers. So you can see the kind of AI graphics built in. So we try to integrate AI and teach kids that you can use it to amplify your thinking, but it also can steal your learning. And so don't let it steal your learning. Instead, use it as a tool, just like you're using all these other tools. And we have it's required actually as a board policy, which is public online. You can see it there, that it's taught in every single grade level, even used with our kindergartners all the way through. Not for every project, not for every assignment, but certainly that's integrated explicitly through, and that teachers are clear with kids when they're allowed to use it, when they're not, and how to cite it in the works that they do.
And if I can answer this a little bit differently, so our design thinking process was created before AI, like before it was commonplace. And it has fit perfectly into the cycle and has also helped us allow students to slow down so that they're acquiring the skills that they need to acquire and not just plugging things randomly into AI and getting it. But if you do like think is thinking about your prompts, thinking about what you're doing, make is where you're putting in your prompts, getting your items, making your changes, and then the reflection is like how well did it do what you did. It starts to build that skill set really nicely, and it's been really cool to see the design thinking process withstand the test of time, even in these 8 years, it felt like a lifetime in terms of technology and STEAM and growth. If you think back about what's happened in the last 8 years in our society.
Did you see in the chat, Josh posted that there's a teacher in Hawaii whose kids are outfitting shipping containers into mobile maker spaces. How cool is that? Like you don't even have to convert a space, you just build a mobile shipping container maker space, which I love.
Yeah.
Yeah, Josh, you also had a question. If you want to just come on off mute and just share what your question was.
Yeah, thank you, Adam and Josh. In the small group, we were talking, I was asking Amy about the kind of social and emotional growth over the progression, and that all of you are kind of tracking, logging, understanding how the kids are coming to understand at a meta level that they're on a journey and that they are progressing and that they are growing whilst they make and do and all of that. And I just wondered about that. Would love to hear what you're thinking.
Josh, right? You want to let me I can give it a shot.
You're better
I
at
think
this.
Josh, to be fair, I think we're probably not doing it as well as I wish we were. We use the Yale program from Mark Brackett called the Ruler program around like emotional regulation, a lot of those pieces, mindfulness, the mood meter. We use some of those tools. What I do find is that perhaps we protect as a society, we protect our kids a little bit, maybe like overprotect them from some of the failure, from some of the setbacks. And we also find that our kids sometimes come to us without all the capacity of being able to sustain those setbacks when the tower falls down and collapses and falls apart, or the car doesn't work and doesn't roll, or the 3D printer model just gets smeared across the plate. That we don't see that resilience in them. I don't know, like kind of our modern kids as we had in the past. They're just not used to it. I think they're protected from a lot of that stuff. But we don't. I wish we had a better way to track it. I'm open to ideas and suggestions around that. I think that these experiences, whether high tech or low tech, do give kids the opportunity to try and fail and experience that, the like all those emotions that go with that whole design thinking process. But it hasn't been an emphasis, but I'd love it to be more so. If you have some ideas, I'd certainly, online or offline, we can connect.
All right. Feel free to add any other questions in the chat. I'd also love to hear from Ellen Woodsby, who was one of our lead designers from Field International on the project. Any lessons that you learned through this awesome partnership with Chappaqua?
Oh, wow. There's lots of things. I think I grew just as much working with Chappaqua, and Josh and I worked closely throughout the entire process. So I saw Josh a lot for several years. It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think yeah, the thing that has always just stuck with me about your process is yeah, just the holistic sense, that thinking about the whole thing. It's not a patch, right? Like I think sometimes we see, okay, if we just infuse a little bit of this somewhere, but it's a holistic thinking about it for a child's, you know, at, throughout their entire schooling. And so that's what this presentation was all about. But like that's what has always struck me. And then just embracing change. I think I've seen even in this, like things, you're using things slightly differently in certain areas than what was originally we thought you were going to use it as. The Adam, you mentioned about the 3D printers, just using the cheap ones now. I remember trying to design those spaces very specifically for the big models and all of that. Um, but just like knowing that things can be flexible and like making sure that spaces are designed to be flexible, which I think we also tried to do in this project. But yeah, the embracing of change and not trying to like just make it fit or make it work. Um, yeah. And I, again, thank you. And Chappaqua is one of my favorite projects I've worked on. So think about it fondly.
Alan, can I add a little bit to what you were saying about the 3D printer part? And
Yeah.
I'll layer on to involve the students in this work as well. I know the students were involved in part of the designing of the spaces, but also when we converted over, we had originally at the middle schools purchased some very large, they were about the size of like one of those vending soda machines. And we had two of them, and they were like really high quality, expensive 3D printers. And after using them for a few years, and I think those are the ones you're referring to about the space being designed kind of around them. After using them for a few years, what we realized is we didn't need high quality machines. We needed more volume and lower quality because at the middle
Mm,
school, kids were starting to produce like keychains and chess pieces and just very small things. And we didn't need them to be like really fancy. We just needed them to be fast, and we needed to produce a lot of them. So we got a team of students, and we had them pick out a bunch of inexpensive 3D printers from Amazon, and we ordered probably 8 or 10 different like $250 printers, and we gave them to the kids to test. And they had one each, and one of the pictures Adam has actually has several of the models still there. And then they told us which one to buy. After they ran them through their paces and printed a bunch of stuff, they told us which one to buy, and that's the one we scaled up. So we actually moved those big machines to the high school, and now the middle schools have a whole bunch of the small machines that the students tested and they liked and they thought worked really well. And so that was like an iteration of ours, I guess, trying to be engineers and designers ourselves to just kind of iterate and improve as we go. But none of us at the time would have known that like those two big machines wouldn't meet the need at the middle school based
Yeah.
on the curriculum and that we made the adjustments there.
Yeah. An aha moment about that. Went to a workshop with the inventor of Logo, who is still around, and she was talking about how we got rid of mainframe and punch card computers where you feed in and funnel into one thing. And now we were recreating it by buying large scale 3D printer for students to use in a space, but you had 40 kids to use one and the prints took forever. So as the technology started to become available, having more throughputs for the make portion is really important.
You know, another thing that Fielding had shared with us during construction, and I'm not sure who had said it, it might have been Jay Littman, who was one of the original architects on the project. He said we designed these spaces for 80 years, said like the average in a school. I don't know if that's true or not true. That's my recollection of it. But these spaces are designed to be used for 80 years. That's the cycle of like reconstruction and renovation. And so the idea of not like hitting the metaphorical ceiling yet, and we've been in these spaces for like 8 years, and like we feel like we just haven't even scratched
Yeah.
the surface. Like they have so much capacity. And sometimes the community will tour and say, like, well, why aren't you using this? And why aren't you doing that? And we're thinking, like, we're on an 80-year timeline. You're on like a 3-year timeline. Like that's just not the way architecture and design works, I don't think. So trying to give ourselves a little bit of grace in that way to, think about these spaces long term and the projects we're doing now, we'll look back at as seeing as like, oh, we could have done better. We could have, those feel a little archaic, but we're on that journey, and the spaces were designed that we have absolutely not like hit the ceiling of what they're capable of. We're not even close.
We are on that journey. Thank you, guys. This has been a great way to end this series of Global Learning Commons virtual events for the year.
As Nathan mentioned, we're wrapping up our school year of webinars with this one. And thank you all for being here. I know there are a lot of faces that have been to every single one. Thank you, thank you. This may be your first time being introduced to this group. While it changes, the core is at the heart of this, that we all care deeply about this work and know that it's a collaborative effort. So I just want to end with a couple notes about how we keep that momentum going. One is that our friends at Chappaqua are very open to inviting tours to see this work in person and experiencing it. So if that's something you're interested in, you can reach out to us. You can reach out to the team at Chappaqua. But that is absolutely something that is an opportunity in the future. Let us know. We can help facilitate making that happen. The second thing I want to say is that we will take a little break, but we'll start back up in the fall with our 26-27 school year of webinar content. So please know that you will get that information as soon as we're ready to push it out. If you want to share some feedback and ideas with us from this past round of school year webinars, that would be great. And we do actually have a couple opportunities to still connect over the summer, although not in webinars. It's our second year of running what we're calling Flex Boot Camp. So Flexible Learning Environment Boot Camp is a professional development experience for educators that we host in the summertime, led by our fantastic learning designer, Nathan. And this is an opportunity for educators to come together from different districts to be in a flexibly designed space and really ask their questions, get some strategies about how to leverage and maximize their own flexible learning environments. So we plan this for July. Great time to kind of have some headspace without kids in the building to be really ready and clear-headed to hit the ground running in the fall. I am going to toss two links in the chat here that have more information and registration links for each of those experiences. One is in Cloverleaf Local Schools, that is in Ohio, Medina County, Ohio, and then that's middle school, high school experience, and then elementary experience at Portage Public Schools in Michigan. So if you want more info, let us know. Thank you again all for being here. If you have any questions, we are always here to help and direct you to the right location.
Take care. We'll see you next time.